The blizzard came out of nowhere. One moment, the sky above Silvercrest Mountain was calm, the kind of muted gray that promised a quiet evening. The next, it split open in a fury of white. Snow didn't fall, it attacked. It spun sideways in angry spirals, hissing against the windows like sand. Winds howled down the chimneys, rattling loose tiles and warping the air with a sound like distant thunder. Inside the old two-story lodge, Margaret Willis paused with her broom mid-sweep. She'd lived through 40 winters in these mountains, but this storm had teeth. She hurried to latch the front door just as the first thud hit it from outside. At first, she thought it was a fallen branch. Then came frantic pounding. "Please, somebody, open up." Margaret yanked the door open, bracing against the wind, and nearly swallowed her gasp. Standing there were 6 figures at first, shivering, pale, wrapped in an assortment of $1,000 wool coats and leather gloves. Snow clung to their hair, their eyelashes. One clutched a briefcase like it was a lifeline. Before she could speak, more silhouettes emerged from the blizzard, 7, 10, 15 in total. "Roads are blocked, cars are buried, we'll freeze out there," shouted one woman in a fur-lined hood, her cheeks raw from the cold. Margaret didn't hesitate. "Get inside before you turn to ice. Shoes off by the entry, don't track water through my hall." She said it like she was scolding children. They obeyed like they were. Within minutes, the grand lobby, normally silent in the off-season, was filled with the sound of heavy breathing, teeth chattering, and designer boots being tugged off by trembling hands. Margaret rushed between them, thrusting towels into their arms and pointing them toward the fireplace. As their faces thawed, recognition struck her like lightning. She knew these people, not personally, but from television, magazines, Forbes covers. Billionaires, CEOs, founders of global brands. She spotted Amelia Hart, fashion tycoon. Victor Lang, real estate mogul. Even Elias Mercer, the tech king whose company practically ran half of America's phones. What were they doing here? "Business retreat," Victor muttered, catching her stare. "Thought we'd beat the storm." Mother Nature disagreed. Despite herself, she snorted. "Seems she doesn't care about bank accounts." A few of them actually laughed. The power flickered overhead, once, twice. Then darkness swallowed the lobby entirely. Several millionaires flinched like gunfire had gone off. "Oh, relax," Margaret huffed, already moving toward the storage closet. "I've got firewood, unless any of you would like to help." 15 sets of eyes blinked at her. No one moved. She crossed her arms. "Didn't you say you build empires? You telling me not one of you can carry a log?" Silence. Then, slowly, Elias Mercer stood. "All help." One by one, the rest followed. And that was how, 10 minutes later, the world's wealthiest power players found themselves stumbling through a dusty storage room, hauling armfuls of firewood while an elderly housekeeper barked instructions. By the time flames crackled high and warmth spread through the room, the storm outside was still raging. But something inside had already begun to thaw. By morning, the world outside the lodge looked like it had been dipped in whipped cream. Snowbanks rose waist-high, draped over every surface like icing on a cake. Icicles glittered from the roof like crystal daggers as the sunlight finally pierced through the storm's aftermath. Margaret was already in the kitchen, kneading biscuit dough with practiced hands. Night had been short, she'd barely slept, too busy worrying about how to feed 15 unexpected guests with her meager winter supplies. But before she could finish setting the table, footsteps shuffled into the kitchen. "Smells incredible," said a voice. She turned to find Amelia Hart, billionaire fashion mogul, standing in the doorway wearing an apron. A pink apron with cartoon strawberries, tied clumsily around her silk pajamas. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "You know how to cook?" "No," Amelia said cheerfully, reaching for a whisk. "But I can follow orders." Before Margaret could object, Elias Mercer appeared beside her, sleeves rolled up. "Point me to the coffee." Then Victor Lang, real estate tycoon, rumored to have bought an entire island just to demolish it for better views, stumbled in, carrying a sack of potatoes like a soldier returning from battle. "Where's your peeler?" he asked. Margaret stared. Was she hallucinating? Within minutes, the kitchen looked like a chaotic cooking show. Millionaires bumping into each other, burning toast, nearly dropping hot pans. Flour in hair, syrup on sleeves. Elias Mercer accidentally cracked eggs onto the floor instead of the bowl and apologized like a schoolboy. Margaret tried to remain stern, but laughter kept ambushing her. When breakfast was finally ready, They dragged tables together into one long line and sat like campers at summer school. Between mouthfuls of pancakes and biscuits, they talked, not about stock markets, mergers, or upcoming product launches, but about childhoods, first jobs, fears. Amelia confessed she couldn't sleep without a nightlight. Victor admitted he'd never cooked an egg before that morning. Elias rubbed his temples. My board would faint if they saw me using a skillet. It suits you, Margaret said dryly. They laughed like they needed it. Then, as the plates cleared, Elias rose from his chair. Margaret, he said, serious now. Last night, you treated us with more dignity than most people who know our names. You didn't ask for autographs. Didn't take photos. Didn't panic. You took care of us. Margaret waved a hand dismissively. Did what anyone would. No, he said, most wouldn't. He exchanged glances with the others. Heads nodded. You told us about your idea for an animal shelter. The abandoned stables you've wanted to restore. How long have you dreamed of that? Margaret hesitated. Since my husband passed. He always wanted a place where the strays could feel safe. Elias nodded solemnly. Then we're going to help you build it. Margaret blinked. Build what? He smiled wide, like a man about to unveil fireworks. You'll see. Before she could protest, they all stood and headed outside, pulling out sleek phones. Calling assistants, investors, private contractors. Margaret assumed they were arranging rides home. She had no idea they were summoning an army. It began with a vibration in the ground. Margaret stood on the porch, steaming mug in hand, staring out at the snow-covered road that wound into the trees. A low rumble grew in the distance, not thunder. Not wind. Something mechanical. Many somethings. Engines. Her grip tightened around the mug as black dots appeared far down the winding path. They multiplied. Grew larger. Tires crunched over snow. Sunlight glinted off polished steel and tinted glass. SUVs. Pickup trucks. Trailers. Vans. Black sedans. Even a semi-truck hauling a crane. She counted instinctively. 10, 20, 50. Her breath caught. 100, 135 vehicles. They lined the road like a parade of giants. Doors opened, and people flooded out, dozens upon dozens. Workers in reflective vests, architects with tubes of blueprints under their arms, electricians carrying crates of equipment, volunteers bundled in bright scarves, a delivery truck stamped with the logo of a national pet supply chain. Margaret turned, stunned, as Elias Mercer joined her. What have you done? He didn't answer with words. He just smiled and gestured toward a tall woman stepping forward, clipboard in hand. Margaret Willis, she asked. I'm Lydia Cole, head of Mercer Foundation Operations. We've brought materials for kennel construction, veterinary infrastructure, fencing, plumbing, lighting, and a supply of food to last your first year. Margaret's mouth fell open. Behind them, Amelia Hart was already directing volunteers like it was Fashion Week. I want flowers lining that walkway. Dogs deserve aesthetics too, she shouted, pointing at the snowbank with a manicured finger. Victor Lang was arguing with a contractor about roofing angles. If we angle it 5 degrees more, we can add solar panels. Don't argue, I own 17 resorts. Someone tapped Margaret's elbow. It was a young woman in a postal uniform, holding out a leather binder. These are the official deed transfer papers for the stables. Signed and notarized at 6:47 a.m. this morning. You're now the legal owner. Margaret stared at the document. Her name embossed in gold. She shook her head, overwhelmed. This is too much. I can't accept. Elias stepped forward, voice gentle. Last night, when everything stopped, when the storm stripped away the noise, we remembered who we were before the money. Lost, lonely, tired. You gave us shelter. Yes, but more than that, you made a scene. We're not here to pay a debt, Amelia added, resting a hand on Margaret's shoulder. We're here because we want to be. Tears blurred Margaret's vision. She didn't wipe them away. Hammering began. Saws buzzed. Laughter echoed across the snow. Dogs barked in the distance. Strays brought in crates from one of the vans, tails wagging as they were released into fenced play areas already being set up. Margaret walked slowly toward the future rising before her eyes. Steel beams being raised, workers calling out measurements, millionaires lifting lumber with red cheeks and clumsy determination. She whispered, voice trembling. My husband would have loved this. Elias nodded softly. Then we'll build it in his name. By sunset, the land was transformed. Lights glowed across fresh beams. Smoke curled from chimneys. Dogs barked happily in fenced yards. 15 millionaires had sought refuge. One storm later, they'd built a legacy, and Margaret, simple housekeeper, accidental hero, finally felt like she belonged in the world she had just changed.